Yes, so say we all. All right, welcome. My name is Don Jones. I'm a Windows PowerShell MVP Award recipient. I'm also a reasonably prolific author about Windows PowerShell. I love Windows PowerShell. I blog about it at windowsitpro.com. I write the monthly PowerShell column for technetmagazine.com. And today we are going to talk about PowerShell remoting. And remoting gets a decent amount of publicity, I guess. Frankly, I think it is the #1 feature in Windows. It is the #1 feature in PowerShell. I think you're going to get a lot of use out of this. And one of the things I want to highlight during this session is not just its utility for remotely managing servers, which who wants to be able to do that, right? But also remotely managing clients. I have a couple of customers who have spent a lot of effort making sure they've got Windows PowerShell version 2 running on all of their client computers. And we've got at least one that actually stepped up a Windows 7 deployment because it was the easiest way to get PowerShell on all their computers. How about that? So here's what we are going to talk about. A little bit about why remoting, the basic feature set, what it can do, why you might care about it, the different forms of remote control. So within PowerShell, there's probably about 3 different things that involve doing something remotely. And I kind of just want to quickly define those because we're only going to be talking about one of them, the major one. And then I'm going to talk about some of the underlying technology that makes it all work. That's the Windows Remote Management, or WinRM service, and the WSMAN, or Web Services for Management protocol. I will be talking about the security aspects of this, the auditing aspects of this, so we're absolutely going to cover all those things. Talk about how to enable and configure remoting, which fortunately is very easy. And then we'll start really diving into how to use remoting. One-to-one remoting, one-to-many remoting. A feature that kind of goes along with remoting called background jobs. We'll take a quick look at that. Look at something called sessions, so how to maintain a persistent connection to a remote machine. And then we'll talk about something that I don't think is really well documented. And by that I mean it's not out there in front of you with a big flashing light. But it is absolutely one of the coolest things in PowerShell, and it really does help solve a problem that we as admins have had for a long time. So that's called implicit remoting. So we are going to try and blast through all of those things in an extremely demo-heavy session. I've got about a half dozen slides to get the background out of the way. Then we're going to jump right into Windows and play with this. A couple of quick housekeeping bits. This session is being streamed live, and it is being recorded. And that means if you need to ask a question, you will need to step up to one of the floor mics. That's also so I can hear you ask the question, but also so all the other people around the globe can hear your question. In exchange for your bravery and getting out of your seat, I do have some prizes that have been provided by the Windows client team. They're really cool USB thumb drives. They're about 4 times as long as your thumb, but it's also a battery, so you can use it to recharge your phone on the fly. So if you ask a great question at one of the floor mics, my able assistant will scurry over and offer you a prize. If you do have questions about security, again, we are going to get to that. It's one of the most important things about this. Folks tend to have a lot of questions. I will cover that. If you could hold security-related questions until we seem like we're hitting that bit, that'll help keep the flow going. And also, one more quick thing. I have another PowerShell session immediately after this one back in Atlanta on the other side of the building. So when we're done here, I'm unfortunately going to have to pack up and run. So I'm not going to be able to hang around and take questions later. If you do have some follow-up questions you want to ask, there's 2 more times you'll be able to find me. I will be in the bookstore this afternoon at 4:30 signing copies of my new book, Learn Windows PowerShell in a Month of Lunches. And tomorrow at 1:30 for about an hour, I will be over at the Scripting Guys booth in the expo hall before that all shuts down. So if you do want to ask a follow-up question about remoting or anything else PowerShell related, that's a great place to find me. What's the topic later today after this one is building reusable tools in Windows PowerShell. And it's a discussion, actually, so we'll get to make things up. So why remoting? I kind of have always felt that Windows is a pretty easy operating system to administer on a case-by-case basis, right? If you have one machine, whether it's a client or a server, it's pretty easy to get stuff done. The GUI makes that pretty easy most of the time. But when you start having to manage 100 servers or 1,000 client computers, that kind of starts to not be so easy. So remoting is actually a strategic move by Microsoft. By building this into PowerShell, they're making it available across all these other products that are starting to build on PowerShell. And it's designed to make it just as easy to manage 10 machines or 100 machines or 1,000 machines as it is to do one. So this is really a core reason to learn PowerShell. If you can administer something from the command line, then you can have it execute on bunches of machines so you don't have to physically walk around and do it. This is effective on both client and server computers. Absolutely everything I'm going to show you today applies to both client and server computers. Plus, anybody still got some XP laying around? Sure you do. This works all the way back to XP. So we'll cover system requirements in just a second. It is not enabled by default, although it is installed by default on Server 2008 R2 and Windows 7. So it's there, it just has to be flipped on. With anything older, you have to install Windows PowerShell version 2, and this comes with it. So I said there were kind of a few different things that you could call remote control in PowerShell, and this is the main three. First of all, there's Windows Management Instrumentation, primarily used through the get_wmy_object command in PowerShell. This utilizes, today, remote procedure calls for communication, and this is not what we're going to be talking about. The next thing is any commandlet that has a -computer name parameter. So commands like get service, get process, get event log, they have a -computer name parameter. They will use whatever method of communication is built into whatever under the hood technology they're using. A lot of times you won't even know what that is. It just works or it doesn't, depending on whether or not you have your firewall turned up. So we're also not going to be talking about that kind of remoting here today. What we're going to be talking about today is actual PowerShell remoting with a capital R. The idea is that Microsoft has, rather than making every single command developer write a computer name parameter and figure out a protocol to talk to remote machines, Microsoft has done all the work for us. They've built everything that we need for remote communications into PowerShell and this technology called WinRM using this WSMan protocol. How many of you have ever tried to get Windows Management Instrumentation, WMI, traffic through a firewall, that RPC traffic? Yeah, a few of you. Who enjoyed it? Yep, that's what I thought. It's not a terribly enjoyable process because that protocol uses a lot of different ports. So when they built WinRM, they decided, let's do one port. Let's build the entire remoting technology off of, this is a kind of obscure technology you might not have heard of before. It's called HTTP. Have you messed with that at all? So the whole thing, this WSMan, Web Services for Management, is just a web service. HTTP is super easy to get through a firewall. It's one port. It can be encrypted. So you get all of this great functionality from it, and it's one thing, one port. This is the way forward. More and more management technologies are going to be built to use WinRM in the future. PowerShell just happens to be the first one of them. So again, WSMan is the protocol. WinRM is the code that actually implements this. So WinRM is a background service, just like anything else. Set it to start automatically and so forth. PowerShell exposes a drive, you know, like the C drive or your D drive. Well, there's a drive called WSMan that exposes the configuration for this in a domain environment. How many of you are running a domain environment? Oh, good. Oh, good, that memo got out. Great. So in a domain environment, between computers in the same domain, this is easy to set up. It just works. Between different domains or in a work group environment, it's not that hard to set up, but there's a few extra steps you have to take. All of those steps are in PowerShell. Just run help about remote troubleshooting, right like it says here on the slide, and it will walk you through every single one of those scenarios. How many of you have a DMZ with some servers in it? Okay, so you probably have to get through a proxy server to talk to those. That's covered in there as well. So you should be able to find everything you need to get it set up in almost any type of environment right in that document. Now, WinRM is not specific to PowerShell. WinRM is kind of like a traffic director. Applications like PowerShell register with WinRM. Traffic comes in. WinRM looks to see what application that traffic is for, hands the traffic off. In this case, it'll be PowerShell. PowerShell does whatever it's going to do, gives the results back, and WinRM takes care of getting it back across the network. So multiple different applications in the future will be registered with WinRM this way. So you'll have one port that you have to get through for all of your management traffic, which is kind of nice. Makes that firewall management a lot easier. We are going to look at some of the troubleshooting in WinRM. It can be a little bit complex, and the troubleshooting aspect of it isn't real well documented, but it's actually very easy to get going. So I'm going to show you where it is, and I'll point you to some other resources as well. And a lot of that comes in through a PS diagnostics module that is included with PowerShell version 2. Security. By default, the only authentication protocol that remoting accepts is Kerberos, which is great for two reasons. Number one, your password is never transmitted across the network, encrypted or otherwise. That's not how Kerberos works. So your credential remains more secure. Number two, Kerberos allows for delegation of credentials, which means if I'm remoted into a remote machine and I ask it to run commands, it's going to run those commands under my credential, not local system or network service. So I will only be able to do what I am allowed to do. This doesn't add or subtract anything from your overall security. Whatever you are allowed to do, you can do through remoting. If you have permission to log onto the console and do it there, you can also have permission to do it through remoting. So that's a great part about the Kerberos protocol. In terms of auditing, any connection to remoting can be audited and caught. It looks like a network logon. It's the same type of logon as if you were accessing the administrative share, like a $C share. It's that type of logon. It is not an interactive logon. It's not like remote desktop. You are not, when you use remoting, you're not spinning up a whole graphical operating environment. So this is a lot less overhead than our RDP would be. So if you have the ability to do something from the command line, doing it through PowerShell remoting will be much, much less impact on your server. There's also not a 2 administrator limit. So more administrators than just those 2 can be remotely operating a server at the same time if you need to. By default, remoting is only available to admins. Now, that help about remote troubleshooting topic I mentioned, if you need to set this up for non-admins in certain environments, explains how to do that. But by default, it's just admins. And I am going to show you a bunch of configuration settings. I'm going to be showing them to you in PowerShell itself, but those can also all be set through a group policy object. So this thing can be centrally configured and controlled. Nice, easy. Anybody using GPOs? Yeah, sure. So nice, easy to configure and get going. Here's your system requirements. This runs on Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows Server 2003, 2008, and 2008 R2. On anything except the newest versions of Windows, you do have to download and install the Management Framework Core. There's your Q article. That includes WinRM, PowerShell version 2, the latest version of BITS, Background Intelligent Transfer Service. So this is all the management framework stuff that goes together. Your machines also have to be running .NET Framework 2. Show of hands who has 2 at least out there. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty old version of the framework, so that shouldn't be a big burden for anybody. It does like version 3.5.1 better. As you have newer versions of the framework, PowerShell will light up more features, but 2 is the minimum, and you'll get great functionality with that. You'll be able to do probably most of what you need to do. Some client-specific applications. So when you are remoted into a client computer, the coolest thing is troubleshooting, and I'm going to show you this in a second. I think it's really, really neat. File folder registry management. You know, you need to get into a client machine and maybe delete something out of the registry or fix a registry key or delete a file that goes along with some line of business app. You can do all of that behind the scenes without having to go through a lot of the remote control rigmarole that you have to go through today when you're doing a remote desktop style. Collecting inventory, anything that might require SneakerNet, you can often do through remoting. So I'm going to show you all of those too, so we'll keep moving here. In fact, let's start with that one. So this is my Windows 7 computer, and over here I have my administrative workstation, which happens to be running Windows Server 2008 R2. So I've got a server and a client. Here's how you enable remoting. So here's my Windows 7 computer. You got 2 ways to do this. Enable PS remoting. Yes, I'm sure. You can see that I've already had it turned on. It doesn't hurt to run this again. The other way would be group policy. Who'd rather do this through group policy? Unless you have that new feature called InternNet to run around to all of your computers and run Enable PS remoting. Group policy is probably easier. Again, help about remote troubleshooting is going to walk you through everything, including how to set all of this up through group policy. It'll even show you how to set up the necessary firewall exception in group policy if you're using the Windows firewall. So this is a really lengthy and very, very complete document. So now that I've enabled remoting on this Windows 7 computer, let's talk about the first type of remoting that there is in the world, and it's called one-to-one remoting. Anyone ever use anything like SSH or something like that? Yeah, so one-to-one remoting looks a lot like SSH. Enter, PS session, computer name, give it the computer name, wait for the miracle to occur, and you'll notice that the Windows PowerShell prompt changes to let me know I'm on a remote computer. Now, again, this is a network logon. It's not an interactive logon. If I had a Windows PowerShell profile script, that would not execute right now. So I'm kind of remoted in behind the scenes. Let's get out to the root here so I have some more room to type. Cannot run graphical applications. This is not remote desktop protocol. In fact, I just locked up the shell. And if you go back over here, there's no notepad floating around on the screen. The user can't see what I'm doing. I'm stealthily behind the scenes. Fortunately, it's smart enough that if you just hit Control-C, it'll give up. So here's the scenario. A user calls the help desk. They're on Windows 7, and they said, I'm having some problems. I don't like the way the power settings on my computer are configured. It keeps going to sleep, or it doesn't go to sleep, whatever. And I've gone in and I've clicked the troubleshoot this problem, and there's a wizard on the screen. All right, how many of you have ever worked in a help desk environment? Okay, so tell me if I'm right or wrong here. Here's how this goes. Yep, okay, click Next. Select the second option. No, the little circle. No, click back. What's it say on this? Reboot. Just reboot. Call me back. Right? That's how that goes. All of those troubleshooters in Windows 7 are accessible through PowerShell. So now that I'm in this remote machine, I'm going to tell it to import module, troubleshooting pack, get troubleshooting pack, C, Windows, diagnostics, system, power. See, I can just tab through here until I get to the one I want. There's a bunch of them in here by default. There's power. Once I get that, let's pipe it to invoke troubleshooting pack. And again, I can't run graphical stuff here. This isn't remote desktop, but all of these troubleshooting packs actually expose themselves as command line menus for PowerShell. Okay, what would you like to do? Well, I'd like to enable USB selective suspend, or whatever else you need to do through this menu. When you're finished, you hit exit, exit PS session. You're now back to your computer. That connection is closed, and you tell the user, thanks, have a nice day, click. So anything you can do from the command line, you can go in behind the background. They didn't have to invite me. They didn't have to approve it. I'm not sharing their screen. They can't see what I'm typing, so they can't do this on there. Because how many times have you walked users through solving a problem, and the next time they have something that even vaguely resembles that problem, they go and do that same thing? And you're like, yes, but deleting the Windows directory isn't always the right answer, sir. So this way, they don't see anything. It's all hidden and behind the scenes. It works the other way, too. Now I'm on Windows. This is my management workstation. I need to get into a server. Enter PS session. Give me the computer name, server-R2. Wait for the miracle to occur. And now I'm running commands right on my server. PowerShell encrypts this traffic by default, although if you wanted to, you could have it use SSL, right? HTTPS instead of just plain old HTTP. Let's take a look at the enter PS session command. And we've got a bunch of options here. Authentication, if you're using something other than the default Kerberos. So if you've enabled BASIC or Digest or CredSSP, you can specify an alternate port if you don't like the default port, which we're going to look at in just a second. You can specify an alternate credential. So if the credential you're logged on as isn't the one you want to be on the remote machine, you can set up that connection with a different credential. And if you have set up SSL, you can force it to use SSL. So you get lots of different fun configuration parameters in here that you can play with. Exit PS session. And again, any command that the remote machine has and is capable of running can be run this way. And it's very, very low overhead. If you do have a question, I'm going to need you to use the floor mic, please. So let's take a look at some of the configuration. Oh, you already made it over there. Great. Go ahead. I'm sorry, say that just a little louder, please. This would work for any command, including what I would call external command line utilities. So I could enter PS session and run ipconfig or nslookup or whatever else. So they'll all work that way. Yep. Sir. Yeah, so you've got a couple people who've locked up your RDP sessions. They've gone home. You don't know their addresses, so you cannot send an assassin over there to get rid of them. Right. You can still get in this way if you've already got all that set up. This doesn't have a hard to connection limit. It has a connection limit, but you have control over it. So that's a great question. Greg, give the man a prize. Greg's behind you. Don't let him hit you. He'll knock you right down. So let's look at some of that configuration. As I said, all of this is exposed through a WSMan drive. So if I cd WSMan, you can see I'm in the local host folder, so I'm in the local configuration for WSMan, and I'm in the service subfolder. So if we go back one level, client affects how this machine connects to others. Service affects how this machine receives connections. So let's play with the service. You can see I've got max concurrent operations, maximum number of connections is 25. I have a default ports, which tells me my default port for HTTP is 5985, and if I had set up an HTTPS listener, its default port would be 5986. And if we go back out, listener is one of these top-level items. So this is the listener that I actually have set up, and it is using HTTP 5985 and it has bound itself to all IP addresses. You can see all the addresses there that it's bound itself to. So this is very, very configurable right from the command line. The vast majority of these options, maximum number of connections, maximum number of shells per admin, max processes per connection, all that stuff can also be configured through group policy. Sir?
Yeah, excuse me, with using the remote session, being in a different domain with no trust relationship, can I use the dash credential and supply a local credential to that domain to get in?
So what would you do for cross-domain stuff? Yeah, you can do alternate credential, and you absolutely would want to do that if it was an untrusted domain, so that you'd be in that remote domain with the right credentials. And that's a great question, too, so we'll get Greg to give you a prize there. The trick is, because of the way Kerberos and WinRM and everything work, there's a few extra setup steps you have to have before you can even do that cross-domain untrusted stuff. Mm-hmm. But once you've done that initial setup and everybody trusts each other as hosts, then it works just fine.
Okay.
So who's excited about being able to do one-on-one remoting with some remote machines? Wouldn't it be great, though, how many of you have servers that all do the same role? Like they're all web servers or all DCs or, okay. And how many of you have client computers that are all essentially the same thing, maybe the same type of job? So wouldn't it be great to be able to type a command once and have it run on all of those simultaneously? Yes? Let's do that. Change back to my C drive here. The command is invoke command. And just like the other ones the last one we've looked at, this has got a bunch of parameters. You can specify an alternate credential, use SSL, specify an alternate port. You can do all that cool stuff. This is a key thing right here, throttle limit. I'm going to give this a command to run, and I've got two ways to do that. I specify the command in a script block, and that's kind of useful if you just have one command or maybe a short command line you want to run, or you can specify a file path, right? And that's if you've got a script full of commands. Your computer will read that script file and transmit the contents to the remote machine, so they don't need to have access to the file path, just your machine does. What will happen is it'll take that command or file, transmit it to as many machines as you specify, execute the command on those machines using local resources, and whatever output those commands create comes back to you, and you can capture it in a file or pipe it out to a CSV or just watch it on the screen or do whatever you want to do with it. So multiple commands, and that's what this throttle limit controls, is how many computers your machine will talk to simultaneously. The default is 32. Now you have to be a little bit cautious on performance because every single simultaneous connection is consuming some resources on your computer. How many of you have an admin workstation with 32 gigs of RAM? What company do you work for? I'd like to come work for them. If you've got a really, really beefy client machine that you're working on, then you can change that throttle limit, jack it up, until you start to feel that you're running into some performance, and then back off a bit. 32 works well. I'm told by some folks on the PowerShell team that they've tested this on up to 25,000 computers, and then they ran out of computers. So it's pretty scalable because it only needs to talk to a certain number simultaneously, and the rest just get queued up. Yes?
With the throttle limit, what is the network protocol? Does it use simulcast or multicast, or can it take advantage of your network layer to have a better performance when reaching out to multiple machines?
Yeah, so for the network protocol, it's purely one-to-one HTTP. So it's making 32 connections to 32 machines. And the reason is that each of those is going to need to send output back. So it actually needs a TCP connection. We have to have the ESPN between us so that I can get those results back.
Okay, and does it load balance at all, or is that your throttle limit reason?
It does not load balance, so my computer is the one doing all the heavy lifting because it has to maintain all those connections. Each remote machine is only one connection, no big deal. And the throttle limit is just to keep my machine from getting overwhelmed, really.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes, sir.
The server side, you said it's using a Windows web service to connect to it. It's not using IIS, is it?
So yes, so whatever machine you are going into is using a web service. That's the protocol. The service is WinRM. There's no dependency on IIS. In fact, neither of these machines has IIS or any of IIS installed.
Yeah, so what happens when you're communicating to a large number of desktops and some of them are not online? How does it handle that?
What happens when you communicate to a whole bunch of machines and one's not online? The default base behavior is it will spew an error message and keep going. You can, using PowerShell's error handling techniques, grab that and maybe log it to a file or set off fireworks or whatever it is you need to do. But the default behavior is just to display an error and keep going. Yes, sir?
How does the script execution policy play?
How does the script execution policy play? Great question, Greg. Another great question. The script execution policy is enforced. So if I ask a remote machine to run a script, it will only do so if it is able to under its execution policy. So if it's set to restricted, no scripts. I can still run commands interactively, but I can't ask it to run a script unless my script execution policy is set up to allow that. So let's take a quick look at what this looks like. I've got two machines running here, so I'm just going to run a very simple command against both of them so you can see what happens. Invoke a command. Let's just run get process. And I am going to do that against, there's a lot of different ways you can specify computer names here. The easy way, like if it's a small number of computers, would just be to do something like this. Just a comma-separated list. Now another way, let's say you have a text file, and in it you've listed one computer name per line, and maybe it's all of your SQL Server computers. So in parentheses, you would just say get content from the name of that file. It'll read those names in, and it'll execute the command against all those. Where else in your environment do you have a big sort of record of computer names? Active Directory. So if you have loaded the Active Directory module, for example, I could say get AD computer minus filter star. So this is going to do everything in the domain. Select and expand out the name because that's the only information I need. And of course, you could provide filter criteria or the name of an OU to narrow it down. You probably aren't often going to run something against every single one of your computers unless it's malicious and it's your last day or something like that. But the idea is you've got a lot of capability. So we're just going to keep it simple for this one. And I'm going to do these two computers. Let that run. Now, even though I'm talking to localhost, it did have to go out to the network and loop back in. So this is still real remoting, even though it happened to be against the same computer. And you'll notice that PowerShell automatically adds a column to all of the output that comes back to you through remoting. And that column is called PS computer name. So PowerShell computer name. And that lets you figure out which result came from which computer. So I could say, you know what, after that, I want you to sort it on the PS computer name. Because when you're talking to a bunch of computers, there's no guarantee that you won't start interleaving results, right? You're not necessarily going to get this computer's results, then that one. They might come back together. So I'm going to sort them on that first. And then let's format that information as a table and group it by PS computer name. And so now it's created sort of a new section for each different computer. And you know what? After I'm done with that, let's just put that out to a file. So now I've got a permanent record of it. So all of this still fits in within the PowerShell pipeline model. You can still take these results. They're objects. Now, they're not live objects, right? These results that I got back do not represent live processes. I can't tell one of them, okay, stop yourself. It's just a snapshot of the processes that were running on each of those machines at the exact time the command actually executed. So you do have to keep that in mind, as you're not dealing with live data. You're dealing with very recent data, but it's slightly different from, fresh data, not farm fresh data. Cool stuff? I mean, this is it. Honestly, if you can do stuff from the command line, and for me, this is one of the big technical reasons to take the plunge and learn PowerShell, because once you can figure out how to do whatever from the command line, pushing it out to multiple computers is as easy as typing in their names. So you don't have to manage multiple computers anymore. You can let PowerShell do it one at a time, 32 at a time, however you need to.
If there's a service name stored in a variable, would those remote computers understand what was in the variable?
So bigger question, how to pass data into this business. Let's take a look at invoke command. You have got a couple of ways you can pass information in. One is the -input object parameter. So any object that is given to -input object will be piped into the pipeline of the remote computer. So you're piping things into that. And the other one you've got is, is anyone else's eyes crossing? Here we go. Argument list. And how many of you, when you're using PowerShell or anything else, command line utility, whatever it is, and you decide you want to do something, your first goal is to hop on your favorite search engine, punch it in, and hope for the best? Yeah, don't do that with PowerShell, please. You don't need to. Look here. Help -example. Oh, there's the examples. So to look for an example of how that argument list is used, there's a lot of examples. Script, there it is. So this is using a local variable. That's what's being passed to argument list. And my script block has a param block. So the contents of this variable are being assigned to $log on the remote computer. And then this value is being assigned to $num on the remote computer. So that's how you can take local values and feed them off to the remote machine where each of them would do whatever it is they're going to do. So you've got quite a few different ways you can kind of go at this. But again, all the examples are right in the help. So RTFM, right? Everybody knows, right? RTFM, wink, wink? Okay. So multiple computers, single computers, all good stuff, but what about when it doesn't work? There are an awful lot of moving parts here. You've got everything from the network itself all the way up to the WS-MAN protocol and the WinRM service and PowerShell itself. And how many of you run firewalls? Yeah, so you got firewalls in there too now. So there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of places for this to go wrong. We, one of the neat things about being an MVP is that you periodically get to go up to Microsoft campus and you sit down with your product group, in my case, the PowerShell team, and they kind of ask you how things are going out there, and you get to complain, and they're very good about listening to that. And they said, well, tell us about WinRM. We're like, oh, dude, we need better error messages. Like, well, what do you mean? We're like, the only error message seems to be access denied. They said, well, here's the thing. This is kind of security sensitive, right? This is pumping commands to remote computers. So it's like when you log on and you get it wrong, it doesn't say, you got the username right, but try again on the password. It just says, I don't know what that is. I can't help you. So when it comes to security, you kind of sometimes have to be a little vague because you don't want to give a potential attacker a clue. So we said, well, but we're trying to fix it. We need some clues. And they said, well, why don't you just use the PS Diagnostics module? And we said, huh? So I said, well, it looks like this. Import module, PS Diagnostics. And we said, yeah, we know what you're talking about. We saw that there in the module list. It's awesome that that's there. We have absolutely no idea what it does. And they said, well, you need to look at the commands for it. And this exists on the server operating system too, by the way. So this is everywhere where there's PowerShell. And we said, okay, we know how to do this. Git command, module, PS Diagnostics. Now, I don't know about you, But when I start seeing words like trace, I get a little squirrely in a production environment because I've turned stuff like that on before and all my logs filled up and the world ended and the server crashed. So I said, well, what's the nice thing about PowerShell? All these commands come with help, right? Help enable PS trace. Oh. So they said, would you like a demo? I'm like, yes, please, show us a demo. So here's all you have to do. It turns out it's not that hard. Enable PSWS man combined trace. Thank heavens for tab completion. Push enter. Make a note of that temp file name because you won't need it. It's completely meaningless to you. Do whatever it is you're going to do. Enter PS session, computer name, server-R2, la-di-da-da-da-da. Let it do its thing. Disable PSWS man combined trace. There it is. The command completed successfully. Now what? Event log. There's a PowerShell operational log, and there's also a Windows Remote Management operational log. And this little dude lists an incredible amount of information. So you get sort of a complete record. I received a response from the network layer, blah, 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 walks through the entire process. So the idea, my recommendation is this. Get remoting working in your environment. Get it working on a couple machines. Capture this kind of a trace for a working connection. Then when you run across one that's broken, you can compare the two and see exactly where it went wrong, and that will give you an idea of what you need to start troubleshooting. Was this a firewall issue? Was the network cable unplugged? Do you not have permissions? Whatever else. Now, this operational log is the human readable data that is produced by the trace process. There is another secret one. View analytic and debug logs. The analytic and debug logs are not intended to be human readable, but what they contain, at least for one of these, it's a hexadecimal data dump of every bit that was transmitted across the wire, except it's in hexadecimal. So all you have to do is this. Go up to my blog, PowerShell with a Purpose, at windowsitpro.com. In the tag cloud thingy, click on remoting or search for it or whatever. I did a little two-part series, and I link you off to a tool that will grab that analytic information out of the log and turn it into English. Right in the shell, you can dump it to a file, you can read it. It's actually a tool that Microsoft gave me that they use internally, and it works like a charm. There's instructions and everything in that blog post for how to do that and what to type and everything else. So that's how you can get a handle on the troubleshooting. Yes, sir?
Is that trace log also available in XP? Because it looks like a Win 7 event.
It is one of so it's one of the new Windows Vista style logs, and I've not actually looked to see what that goes into in XP. I actually have an email out asking. I'll probably ask here. In fact, if the PowerShell team wasn't speaking exactly opposite us right now, we would probably ask them. But probably you would use that temp file for that, I imagine. Yes?
What other information would you gather from that log as opposed to the other one that would be pertinent? That you know what I'm saying, with the two different logs that you're viewing?
Yeah. So the operational, the kind of the difference is the operational log is each step that the software is taking. I'm trying to open a connection. I'm trying to launch the shell. I'm trying to create a run space. I'm trying to stand on one leg. I'm trying to sacrifice a goat. Whatever steps it has to take to work. The analytic log is the raw data dump. I sent this data across the network. So if you're sending a command, you can actually see your command in that data. So they're kind of complementary. Most of the time when I've had to troubleshoot this, the operational log has been all I really needed to figure out where it was broken. Go ahead, sir.
All right, it's all great, but one issue, like if I'm doing a troubleshooting of a computer, I will use the MMC, connect to the computer, look at the event viewer, then search to see what's going on to the event viewer, then do my troubleshooting, and it's all clicking. In PowerShell, is there any way I can pull the remote event viewer, filter it by event ID, and see what's going on in there. That would be awesome if that's possible.
Help get event log. There's actually a couple of commands. So this is the core logs. You would actually want to look at help star event. It's get win event in here somewhere, right at the top. So yeah, there's a command that will pull all that information out. And then once you've got it, you can use, as you said, other PowerShell commands to filter it, sort it, put it into a CSV file, whatever you need to do with it. Yep, so you can get to all those logs right from the files too, the command line. That's a great question. Greg, is there any more? Is this the last? Congratulations. Thank you for asking that. So that's kind of the troubleshooting / diagnostics end of it. Now I promised to show you something called jobs. Imagine if I did this with 500 computers. How many of you have at least 500 computers? Who's excited about watching them sit and complete? It's like watching paint dry, isn't it? It's not interesting till it's done. So what you can do with the invoke command is add a -as job. That will kick off a PowerShell background job. And actually what you get is a parent level job, and that's the one you're seeing right here. And then underneath that, a child level job for each computer that you are contacting. So I can run get job -id1, because that's the ID of the parent job, select, expand, child jobs. And that'll show me the status for each individual computer that was involved. As the data comes back from those remote computers, it gets cached in memory until you are ready to work with it. And the way you do that is with receive job. Just specify the ID number of the job you want to get data out of. Now you can specify one of the children, so 2 and 3 here, or you can specify the parent and get everything. There's a trick. By default, you can only do this once. When you get the data out of memory, PowerShell gives it to you and then no longer has it in memory anymore. So if you want to keep it, you need to put it out to a file of some kind. Export CLI XML results.xml, for example. Or you specify the -keep parameter. And that tells PowerShell, get me the results, but save a copy so that I can do this again in a minute, and again, and again. Now, obviously, if you've just run a command against 10,000 computers, and those 10,000 computers all returned 12 million lines of data, what's the math on that? Big number. You need to have the memory locally to be able to store all of that. So you just kind of have to be a little bit aware of the performance around that idea, because if you're bringing back a ton of data, it's got to have somewhere to live. So just kind of be aware of that. Now, there are some other commands for managing jobs. Get command -noun job. We looked at get job, we looked at receive job. Remove job is for when you're done. Get the job, remove the job, that cleans it up. Start job allows you to create a job that just runs under local resources. So it still uses the remoting subsystem, but it's running and executing entirely on your machine. You just want it to happen in the background instead of interactively. Stop job will kill a job that appears to be hung. Or wait job. This is useful in a script. If you've got a script that's kicking off a bunch of jobs, wait job is a way to pause that script until your jobs reach a specified state, like completed, and then the script could continue running and do something with those jobs or whatever else. So you got a lot of options to work with on this whole job mechanism. It's a really, really neat and robust system. The one thing you have to keep in mind, though, that the machine it's running on needs to be robust enough to handle the number of connections you've allowed with the throttle limit and to handle the amount of data that you're asking it to store as those results come back. So I'm thinking everybody goes home and asks for a RAM upgrade and a 64-bit machine and a pony, right? All the way in the back, sir. Give it a second. There you go.
Hello. If you know that you're going to just dump that data into something else, is there a way to keep it from stopping in RAM until you get it?
If you know that you're going to be dumping the data into, say, a file, is there a way to stop it from doing what?
Right, well, you're running it as a job, and by default, it's putting it all in memory.
Yeah.
Can you just have it automatically go off into disk so that you can go get it later?
No. If your goal is to just stream it to a file as soon as it comes in from the network, you wouldn't run it as a job. You would just do a regular invoke command, out file, results dot. Actually, you probably wouldn't. You would do export CLI XML. That's probably the best way to store it because it retains as much of the fidelity of the original information as possible. So you just give it a results.xml. And it's going to run interactively now. So if you had other stuff you wanted to do in the shell, open up another shell window and let this one just do its thing. Then when it's done, you can import CLI XML. Oops. And you'll have access to all your data. And from there, you can still sort on PS computer name, format table, group by PS computer name. You can still run all that through the pipeline, and it'll still behave as live, fresh data. Great question, but out of prizes, sorry. So who's liking the background jobs? Yeah, pretty cool stuff? Couple of little, not caveats, just a couple pieces of information about these things. They live entirely in the shell, right? These aren't scheduled tasks. So if I'm remoted into a server and I've started a job, and my buddy Greg remotes into that same server, he can't see any of my jobs. He can see that I'm running PowerShell, but he can't see what I'm doing inside of it. It's just like if I were running Word, right? You could tell from the process list that I'm running Word, but you can't see what documents I'm editing in Word. Same exact idea. When you close the shell, all of your jobs go away because the jobs live in that process. So you don't probably want to do this. Invoke command, script block, start job, script block, dir, on computer server-r2. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Because what's going to happen, my computer is going to create a connection to server R2 and tell it, hey, start a job. And in that job, run dir. And the remote computer is going to say, got it, process underway. And then my computer is going to say, great, I'm out of here, bye, shut down your process. So the job might even finish, but you have no way to get to the results because that copy of PowerShell on the remote machine closed. It's gone. It doesn't exist anymore. So the job is gone. So the results are gone. So you wasted your time. What you might want to do, though, is work with a persistent connection. New PS session on computer name server minus R2. I've now created a persistent connection to that remote computer. Server R2 has a copy of PowerShell running on it in the background under my credentials, waiting for me to tell it to do something. Now, there are some timeouts here. If I just leave it sit, it will eventually get bored and go away. And you can configure those. It's in that WSMan drive that we looked at before. So you can control how long this will sit and wait and everything else. But when I'm ready to use it, I need to get the session. And there's a couple of ways to do that. Here's the way I like to do it. Server equals get PS session for the computer name server R2. In other words, from my local list of sessions, get the session that is connected to server R2 and stash it in the variable $server, just because it makes it easier to use in the future that way. So I've done that. Now I can invoke a command such as get event log, log name security, get me the newest 1000. And instead of specifying a computer name, I will give it that existing connection. I could also create multiple existing connections, stick them all into that variable, and this would run it against all of the connections that were in that variable. I'll do that in just a second. That's what it looks like. I didn't run it as a job, so I'm getting all the results back immediately, which is a little boring. So let's hit Control-C. I can also do this. $sessions equals new PS session minus computer name, server R2, local host, whatever you like. Make the list as long as you want. all of those are now in that sessions variable, and if I run invoke command against that sessions variable, it will run the command against all of those computers. So this is just another way to do it. It's identical, except that when I'm done running the command, the connection is still up and still usable. This leads us to a really, really cool feature, though. Probably one of my favorite features about remoting, and I didn't even know about it until someone on the PowerShell team explained to me what it was. Let me lay out the scenario for you. How many times have you gotten a new version of Windows Server with all of its awesome new admin tools, and you can't install them on your client computer because it's running an older version of Windows? Right? This really happens a lot. We get this kind of version-y mismatch between client and server. It's like you have to upgrade everything at the same time so it'll all run in the same place. Anyway, so one thing that you can start doing with PowerShell is eliminating that problem. Here's an example. Here's my server R2 computer. If you look at the list of modules on here, one of the modules is Active Directory. It's the first one on the list because this is a domain controller. That Active Directory module is available on Windows 7 if you have installed the Remote Server Administration Toolkit, or RSAT. And that Active Directory module cannot be installed on older versions of Windows, Vista, XP, whatever. Here I am on Windows 7, Get Module, List Available. I have clearly not installed the RSAT, so I don't have that module. And sitting here in this demo right now, I'm not particularly planning to go download the RSAT and install it. It'll probably take 10, 20 minutes. I don't have that kind of time. When was the last time anybody built their admin workstation? Have you rebuilt your computer recently? How many days did you spend installing admin tools? Right? Like a week and a half. It's ridiculous. You don't necessarily need to do that as more things come into PowerShell. Watch this. All right, I'm going to make sure I have a fresh start here. So I'm going to get all of my PS sessions and remove them. Okay, so fresh start, I have no open connections to remote computers. Session equals new PS session. I'm going to create a persistent connection to the computer that contains the admin tool I want to use. Now, invoke command. And the command I'm going to invoke is import module Active Directory. And I'm going to ask that command to be executed on that session. So now that remote computer, you'll even see it happen, that remote computer has loaded its Active Directory module into memory, it's ready, and that copy of PowerShell is still running because I left the session open. Here's the magic part. Import PS session. From the session in this variable, I want you to import the Active Directory module. And this is optional, but just so that I can kind of keep track of what command is running where, I want you to put a prefix on the commands, rem, for remote. Here it goes. What it's done is created and loaded a module on my local Windows 7 computer that contains shortcuts to all of the commands in the Active Directory module on the remote computer. So I can run get AD user. Oh, no, I can't, because I put that prefix on there. Get rem AD user. It's smart enough that if I leave off a mandatory parameter, it will come back to my computer and prompt me for it. Okay, filter all. There you go. And I get all the results. It's like get AD computer minus filter star. It's just like the command, rem AD computer. It's just like the command lives on my computer, but I never installed it. Now, this will only keep working so long as I have that connection open to the remote machine. And so something that I do at home in my PowerShell profile, which is the script that loads every time you start the shell, is I set up a connection to my domain controller, and I import a couple of modules that I know I'm going to want to use all the time. So this stuff's ready to go. Here's how slick it is. This is cool. I can't actually believe that they took the time to make this work. Help get rem AD user, and it brings the whole help file over too. Right? I mean, that's quality. That's craftsmanship. When you're finished, get PS session, remove PS session. Done. It's all gone. Help, get rem AD user, no dice do. No idea what you're talking about because I shut the connection down. Now, what do you think happens if I have an open session and I close the shell? Nothing bad. Cleans it up. No big deal. You're not leaving an open connection out there. The remote machine will realize that the connection is no longer available on the other end, so it'll just close its copy of PowerShell. It's very, 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 very low key. Just kind of works. Really great stuff. So I'm thinking that in the future, right, as more and more things are built on PowerShell, we don't install admin tools on our admin workstation anymore. We just get 32 gigs of RAM and a 64-bit machine and a pony, and we just import all the commands and let the server do the work, because when I was running that remote command, it was executing on the domain controller. Here's a little tip. Domain controllers can talk to Active Directory really fast, right? So I'm not dragging as much stuff across the network. I'm not creating as much processing on my computer. My computer's just saying, hey, get me this stuff. Oh, thanks. So it's a really great administrative model going forward. All the way in the back again. Wait, hang on real quick till we get the mic up. Give it a shot now.
Sessions to the same machine?
Can you have multiple sessions to the same machine? Yes. Just as two admins could have a session into the same machine, one admin can have multiple sessions into the same machine, and you can, through group policy, control the maximum number of shells per admin, as well as the maximum number of total connections and a lot of other parameters. So, you know, if it's a machine and you're a little bit worried about all your administrators piling onto it, then you can exercise some controls over that. And before you go home and get excited and start locking that down, wait and see if it becomes a problem. I mean, this is a pretty low overhead thing, so it seems to me that a lot of the defaults are reasonably sensible in the way they're set up. So it might make more sense just to see if those work. And then if you run into a problem, you can start ratcheting it down a little bit. I know it's easy to get excited and just start locking everything down, but it really leave yourself open for functionality first. Yes?
Can you do group policy control logging on the server and the machine that's actually, so you can log the commands that were run against it?
You just killed my buzz. Yeah, so here's what you can't do. PowerShell has no enforceable way today of logging every single thing that goes on. So when I log into a remote computer, no profiles run, so there's no way to tell it, I want you to log every command that happens. What you can do, voluntarily, is start a transcript on your local computer. Now, everything I do, including things that I do through a remoting connection, will be logged to that file. But I had to remember to do it. I could put it in my local profile, but at any time I can do this. So it's not really a security log. However, remember I said before, this does not add or take away anything from your security. How many of you audit things like new user creation or deletion? Okay? That happens at the directory level. It doesn't matter what tool you use. So if you use Active Directory users and computers, well, there's no log of everywhere you clicked with your mouse, but there is an event when you do things like delete a user or create a user. Same thing here. There's no automatic log of every command you type, but if you do something that triggers an event that is audited in your environment, you get the audit. So there's no bypassing security here. Yes, sir?
Suppose you want to run a script on the Windows 7 multiple machines, but you have one little problem with user account control requiring you to click Run or OK.
I agree. So PowerShell is constrained by user account control, but it does not participate in user account control, which means if you tell PowerShell to run a command that requires admin privileges and you don't actually have admin privileges, you won't get the little bloop, bloop dialog box. It just gives you an access denied. That said, that's why invoke command has a -credential parameter. If you provide an admin credential to this parameter, then whatever command you told it to invoke will run as a real admin, because this is a network logon, not an interactive logon. And so for those network logons, UAC doesn't go in and rip off the admin token, from, SID from the token there. So you really are an admin if you specify it this way. You've just got to make sure if you're in an environment with UAC, which is a great point, that you are specifying truly admin credentials, or the credentials of whatever is needed to accomplish that particular task.
How can you, what's another method of using the credentials without actually having to put the password in there if you wind up putting in a script? Or
Is there a way to provide the password without providing the password?
yeah, pretty much, you know.
No, not really. Here's the closest you can do. If you've got a credential you want to use over and over again, you can run get credential, punch it in, administrator, without a password apparently. Let's try that again. Administrator, tab. And now that $cred variable contains my username and my encrypted secure string password. That $cred could be passed to the credential parameter, so it keeps me from having to type it over and over. That's another thing I actually do in my profile script. Right at home, anytime I open a copy of PowerShell, because I usually do it in the morning and then leave it open all day, it'll prompt me for my admin password right then and there. And so I've always got that $cred ready to go whenever I want to pass it to something like invoke command. So I could do invoke command credential $cred. And it's not going to prompt me now because it's got it all bundled up. So if anybody has any other questions about, is there a way to hard code the password in the script? That's a horrible idea. And I'm definitely not going to go down that path. But it's difficult on purpose. You really don't want to hard code passwords into a script, especially if they're domain admins. Yes, sir.
Follow on. We've been doing a lot with this. The one thing we haven't been able to do, ICM, script block, dirc : but dir hack, UNC hack seems to completely fit.
Yes. I think I know what you're saying. So stay right there for a second and see if I'm getting this right. Yeah, I have to unwind the aliases in my head. So invoke command, script block, dir server share, something like this.
Right.
Here's what this is doing. And I'll send it off to server R2. Kerberos, by default, so the default configuration in the universe allows for single hop delegation. So I'm logged into my computer as administrator. I can prove it because it says administrator in the title bar, right? Everybody sees that? That's big enough, 3 feet high. So I'm admin. This is going to delegate my credential to server R2. So server R2 will be able to execute commands as me on itself. The minute it has to go off to a network resource, it's not allowed to delegate that credential a second time. You can enable that. So it takes a little bit of tweaking of your Kerberos protocol in the domain and enabling a different authentication protocol, help invoke command, called cred SSP. So there is a little bit of tweakage that has to happen. I did a blog post about it. There's a bunch of other folks who have as well. If you go to your favorite search engine, punch in PowerShell second hop, it will probably pull up one of those articles right away. It just takes a little bit of extra. And one of the reasons I want you to read the article is because I want you to read the whole article so you also understand the potential security downsides of doing this, like anything that might be incompatible with your security policy. So it's not just to turn this on. This can go badly depending on how you feel about the word badly. Some people don't care, some do. Yes, sir.
Since it uses HTTP, how do you handle authenticated proxy?
So going through a proxy, that would be covered in help about remote troubleshooting. That covers that. It can, there's some, again, there's some configuration you have to set up if you need to go through a proxy that requires you to log in. But yeah, that's in there. I'm sorry, I didn't hear any of that. Yeah, if you could. It's a little echoey up here.
Is it safe to say that I could run in the file server without even running the window piece on top of it, just install a core server and that's it, and enable file service?
So is it safe to say that you could run a file server with just PowerShell on here and not actually any Windows?
Yeah, and do away with it because that was...
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what I've got here. It's not a file server, it's a domain controller, but I'm not hiding my start menu. I don't have one. This is server core. So I have no other. And how many of you have used server core, by the way? Does this remoting thing and server core, the existence of those two, start to sound like a 1 + 1 = no more Windows in the future? Yeah? I mean, you can do that with your servers. So, I mean, today it's probably not super easy because not every single thing has been instrumented in PowerShell yet, but that's going to happen. And so Windows without Windows would be pretty cool on the server side because you'll still have your GUI here on Windows 7 or whatever your client is. So, folks, we've got about 9 minutes. I want to do a couple of quick wrap-up things. As I said, I do have another session in the other side of the state. So I'm going to dash out of here when we finish. So once we're done, we're done. But if you want to grab me, I will be doing a book signing in the bookstore at 4:30 or very shortly thereafter. And tomorrow I will be over at the Scripting Guys booth, which is kind of in the community area near the Ineta and folks. And I'll be there at 1:30 tomorrow. So if you have any questions that I didn't get to here, please drop by and I'd love to answer those. So real quickly, just a couple of wrap-up bits. That is my book, Learn Windows PowerShell in a Month of Lunches. It is designed to teach you PowerShell 1 hour at a time. You give me a lunchtime during the week, weekdays only, weekends are for families, I get that. You give me a lunchtime every weekday for a month and I will make you a guru. The bookstore has also got the companion video DVD, which is not usually sold anyplace. So you can get 100 videos to walk you through every single step as well. Some more track resources that you can take a look at. And obviously good stuff online. Here's the really important bit. Please get on MyTechNet and complete a session evaluation. It's really important not only to tell the Tech Ed organizers how I did and to tell me how I did, but also to let them know that this was a topic that you did or did not find useful so that they can set up future Tech Ed session schedules to be even more to your liking. So I'll take just a couple of questions if anybody wants to step up to the floor mics, and then we'll let you go. Yes, sir.
I have a question about the invoke command session that you were talking about earlier. You did say that you cannot log that specifically. There's no good way to get logging out of it. If you pass that a script that actually had that start transcript command that would then log whatever shows up on that screen?
Yeah, if you gave it a script that told it to start a transcript, then yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And then just have it append to that log.
Yeah, that would totally work.
Okay, because everything I do that with, and then even if you had 100 different computers, if it appended that log, or would they each need their own individual log?
They would be creating that locally.
Locally on that box?
On the computer that executed the command.
Okay, so then you'd have to, at the end, have it pull it back or drop it onto a share.
Yeah, copy it back or email it to yourself or whatever.
Great,
yep.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, like I said, if you've got any questions and you want to find me tomorrow, you know where to do that. I will be in the bookstore signing copies of the books at 4:30. Thank you very much for being here, and enjoy the rest of your show.